I want to welcome everybody here today, and if you should be visiting, if you would, sign a visitor card in front of you and just leave it in the pew or put it in the collection basket or something, and we'll take care of that. The communion supplies and the offering baskets are in the back if anybody has need of that. Let's don't forget our Wednesday night devotional at 6 o'clock, and I happen to know that we're having Doc Turner hamburgers that night, so you might want to be sure and be there on that night. Sick list is kind of long. You'll find a lot of it in the bulletin. Some of it didn't make the bulletin, though. Jackie Bella, I happen to know, is having some rather delicate eye surgery tomorrow morning in Oklahoma City. That's correct, isn't it, Jackie? Okay, so we need to remember that. Bo Chancellor, I saw him yesterday in the drugstore, and Bo is not doing well, and I don't see him here today. San either, for that matter, so we need to remember them in prayer, if you would. Richard and Cheryl are, of course, here, but always in need of prayer right now, so let's remember them. Also, Reba and Jean Schmidt, not members here, but townspeople that are in need of some assistance and prayer, so let's remember Reba and Jean. She's not well at all. Mary Ross, the news from her continues to be pretty bad, so we need to keep remembering her, please, in prayer. The Holt family has been struggling. The Tammy Glover, Keegan Holt, they have COVID, and is Danny here? I thought I saw Danny. Yeah, there he is. Okay, we need to remember all of them in prayer, please. Kevin Feltman, that we mentioned Wednesday night, and I think last Sunday as well, had heart surgery. He did come through it. He is still in the hospital, though, so let's remember Kevin, another Cordell person. Bill Jones has been added to the list of those in the care centers. He's here in Cordell, and I think we're able to visit inside there, aren't we? So let's all make it effort to visit all of our people in the care centers, and especially remember them in your daily prayers. I know. I knew there was something else. Tonight at 5 o'clock, there's a hot dog feed at our house. If you can make your way to our house and want to be a part of that, we'd sure love to have everybody. If that's something of interest to you, please keep that in mind at 5 o'clock this evening at our house. 1115 North Temple, right next to Keith Gerlach, that man right there, okay? All right, let's begin our worship service this morning with prayer. Almighty God, we come to you this morning as humbly as we know how, knowing that you are here with us at this moment, knowing that you hear us as we beseech you in prayer. Please, dear Lord, help us to always be humble servants of yours every day. We pray, dear Lord, as we attempt to worship you this morning, that it would be pleasing to you and beneficial to us. Please, dear Lord, be with those of our number who are sick and hurting within this congregation and here in this town. We want to mention especially Jackie and Bo, Richard and Cheryl, Reba and Jean Schmidt, Mary Ross, Tammy Glover and Keegan Holt and the Taylor family, Kevin Feltman, for Bill Jones, who's been added to the list of those in care centers, and for all of those, we pray, dear Lord, a blessing upon them. Please be with us, dear Lord, through this week. We pray for your strength and your wisdom and your guidance, and we beg forgiveness of our sins. These things we pray through Christ. Amen. God is so good. All four stanzas, please.
God is so good. God is so good. God is so good. He's so good to me. He cares for me. He cares for me. Somebody prayed for me. They had me on their mind. They took a little time and prayed for me. Don't you know they got down on their knees? I'm so glad they prayed. I'm so glad they prayed for me. My brother prayed for me. He had me on his mind. He took a little time and prayed for me. Don't you know he got down on his knees? I'm so glad he prayed. I'm so glad he prayed for me. My sister prayed for me. She had me on her mind. She took a little time and prayed for me. Don't you know she got down on her knees? I'm so glad she prayed. I'm so glad she prayed for me. My Jesus prayed for me. He had me on his mind. He took a little time and prayed for me. Don't you know he got down on his knees? I'm so glad he prayed. I'm so glad he prayed for me.
Let's pray together. Our Father in heaven, holy is your name. Holy is the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. And we know that you are set apart in perfection and sinlessness, and you are righteousness, and you are complete so that you call yourself I am. You are complete in every way. You keep your promises, you tell the truth, and you never stop loving us. And we come before you because of your love and because of your graciousness. And we come before you because Jesus has given us that right. You sent him to this earth. He willingly came. And without him, we would not be able to address you. And so we praise you and we thank you for blessing us and we thank you for watching over us and we thank you for creating for us a place to be when this life is over, a place that's what we call paradise, a place that where you are, where your Son is. And we thank you, Father, for the Spirit that you put inside of us and for the encouragement that your Spirit gives and the guidance your Spirit gives. Father, as we come before you this morning, we come before you as flawed people, sinful people, yes, sinful, but washed in the blood of your Son, Jesus. But we also come before you so frequently tired from the difficulties of this life and the pressures of this life and the anxieties of this life. And in that tiredness, we so often get discouraged. And I know there are people discouraged this morning, and we pray, Father, that you would work for our good and help us. And there have been several who have been mentioned who are ill, and we pray for those people that you will encourage them, and people like Mary Ross who have been sick for such a long time. And we pray, Father, that you would give comfort and healing and whatever you know is best. Pray for Jackie as he has this eye surgery, and eyes are so delicate, and we pray that it'll go really, really well. We're thankful, Father, that you've worked in the life of Joyce, and that she this morning, when asked how she's feeling, she said, I'm feeling really good, and we're thankful for that. And we know you can do things, and we know you will do things. Pray for people like Daddy who have gone into the nursing home, and how I've seen, and maybe others already knew, but the reality of the difficulty of moving away from home into a situation like that, and pray for that situation. And then beyond that, Father, we grow tired as we look at our country and we see what was at one time a country in love with you and a country following you and a country now where so many voices are trying to take us away from you and trying to destroy your name and the value of your name and the value of your salvation. And they seem so intent, Father, and we ask that you would intervene and you would stop this, that you would act. We pray, Father, your truth will be seen everywhere. We pray, Father, this morning that you would bless us as we assemble together, that it might relieve us from some of our tiredness and some of our discouragement, and that you might encourage us and help us to encourage one another. We're thankful for the hot dog thing tonight, for a moment of encouragement and fun and laughter there. You are good, just as we spoke in that song a moment ago. You are really good, and we're grateful for that. And so we pray in the name of your Son. We use his name because we believe that his name is the greatest name that's ever been spoken, and we believe that using his name makes a difference with you. And so we speak like this morning by the authority and by the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
We will glorify the King of Kings. We will glorify the Lamb. We will glorify the Lord of hosts, who is the great I am. Lord Jehovah reigns in majesty. We will bow before his throne. We will worship him in righteousness. We will worship him alone. He is Lord of heaven, Lord of earth. He is Lord of all who live. He is Lord above the universe. All praise to him we give. Hallelujah to the King of Kings. Hallelujah to the Lamb. Hallelujah to the Lord of Lords, who is the great I am.
Okay, I looked in the bulletin and I saw that recipe for that drink I talked about last week that had changed my life. Sue's thought that I better give a bit of disclaimer. It is healthy. It has cured my gout, but it's not necessarily delicious. Okay? Yeah, it's better than that. But if you'll put more berries in, which Sue's doesn't put all out, it makes it taste better, okay? But it's, anyway, careful of the taste. Okay. Well, I suspect that you are realizing we're coming very near to the book of Acts. And that is true. We have this lesson this morning from the book of Acts, and certainly one more, what I consider to be so very important lesson from the book of Acts. Perhaps a third, but no more than three. 2 or 3 lessons left. This morning, I hope that, well, in fact, I hope that the book of Acts has been good for you. I thought I knew a little bit about the book of Acts, but in going through this book, I have found so many things that have changed my perspective and helped me, and I hope it's helped you the same way. And I hope the lesson this morning does the same. You probably know that Paul has been in Caesarea. Now he's under the guard of the Romans. And it seems like that Paul and this Roman commander in Jerusalem have become friends. And that Roman commander learns of a plot that the Jews have to take Paul's life. The Jews are always wanting to do that. They think the best way to handle that problem with Paul is just to kill Paul. It's what they've done to Jesus, what they'll do to Paul, it's what they've done to others, and will continue to do. But the commander learns of this plot, and he, under heavy Roman guard in the middle of the night, moves Paul, transports Paul from Jerusalem to Caesarea. And there Paul is put under the charge of a Roman governor whose name is Felix. And the Jews, of course, will come to present their case against Paul to Felix, and Paul will present his case, and Felix can't make up his mind. And you'll note in some of the verses that Burke will put on the screen that Felix, deep down, wanted to keep Paul there, and did keep Paul there for 2 years, because what he really wants is a bribe. Now that ought to trigger something in our minds to make us realize That's kind of been the history of so many, not all, but so many politicians. They have been being dishonest for a long, long time. But where it says that he had him there hoping that he would get some money in order to release Paul, it also says this, that Felix and his wife Drusilla came to listen to Paul privately. And Paul talked to them about his faith in Christ Jesus. And Paul reasoned with Felix and his wife Drusilla about righteousness and self-control and judgment that is to come. And when Felix heard this reasoning, says he was frightened by it. And I can kind of understand why he would have been frightened about it. So I want us to try to look at those three concepts this morning. And I know as I say that our lessons don't last very long, and each one of these concepts could last for one lesson or multiple lessons. That's not my intent. I want you to get a picture of what Paul is doing with this Roman governor who gets frightened in the conversation. He talks about judgment. We'll start there. There's a verse in Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 27 that we used to use a whole lot. So we've used it so much that everybody here will remember what the writer of the book of Hebrews is saying. That all of us are going to die, and after we die on this planet, we're going to face judgment. But as I thought about that this week, I thought about myself in this regard. How often do I think about my own death? Now, you might ask that of yourself. How often do you really think about your own death? Well, I'm reminded of how fragile life is once in a while. A lady in Lubbock that I worked with, 60 years old, recently died. She and I worked together at a healthcare company. She was the director of human resources. She was the only one of that original executive team left. Everyone had gone from that company. She was wanting to leave desperately, and so she and I texted a lot about how to position her severance package and how to do this and how to do that. And one day I texted Mary, and I didn't get a text back recently. And I thought, that's strange. About 10 days later, I get a text back. She said, I am so sorry, but I've been in ICU with something called pulmonary embolisms. Not COVID, but whatever that is. And so I would text once in a while and say, Mary, how are you doing? And she would say, well, I think I'm getting better, but it's slow. And then the text stopped again. And I wondered what's happening to Mary. So I began to contact some of my old executive team and ask them, and they would say, we haven't heard. And then one who had also left finally said, Ken, she's back in ICU, and it does not look good, and I don't think she's going to make it, and Mary didn't make it. And so I had a moment where I thought, yes, life is fragile. 60-year-old woman, vibrant woman is gone. But even then, I didn't think about my own death. I seldom ever think about me dying, Ken dying. Do you think about that? Because I always take this approach. It's out there somewhere. It's out there somewhere. It's in a distance. Now, if I act like that, think like that, respond like that to the subject of my own death, what do you think is the reality of how frequently I think about judgment? And it's almost never. It is almost never that I think, and maybe it's almost never that you think about this reality that we're going to stand before the judge some time. After we die, we're going to go through judgment. Now, there are bunches of passages about the judgment. Maybe it's something we ought to study sometime. I've just chosen one. In John chapter 5, Jesus is talking about it in verse 22. Burke will show you. Jesus is going to tell us, it's not my Father who's going to be the judge. I'm going to be the one doing the judging. My Father sent me to die on this cross. My Father sent me to save this world. I'll be the one who ends up judging. And if you drop down to verses 28 and 29, he says, the time is coming when all who are in the grave will hear my voice and they'll come out. And those who have done evil, those who are wicked, will come out to destruction. Those who have done good come out to live of judgment. And I try to think about what the Bible really says about judgment. And you kind of get this idea that we're all going to stand there and tell everything that we've, or had everything exposed at least, that we've done wrongly. And I'm going to tell you, that ought to be frightening to Ken Jones, because the list is mighty long of everything that I've done wrongly in this life. And likely your list is really wrong. But that's not how judgment's going to work, at least in my opinion. That's not how it's going to work. This ought to be really good news to all of you, because there's this subject of righteousness. And righteousness has to be understood like this. You and I are really, really sinners. Of all the books in the New Testament that are called letters, the very first one in the New Testament after the book of Acts is the book of Romans. You've heard me say likely before that everything written in the New Testament past the Gospels, the book of Romans is by far my favorite. The book of Romans has done more to change me and to change the way I think than any other book. But as you begin the book of Romans, Paul, the writer of that book, is going to make absolutely certain that we understand that we are sinners. And so he'll start talking about the evidence that God is the creator is everywhere. Just look around. That's my paraphrase. Did you see the full moon this week? The stars this week? The sun coming up? Maybe not this morning, you didn't see it, but some morning this week, maybe you saw it coming up. Look at this human body. God, the evidence of God is everywhere, and yet Paul says, here's what happens. Instead of worshiping the God who made all this, we end up worshiping things that have been made with human hands. It's called idolatry, and everybody is guilty. And then he gets into sexual things. And yes, it's in the book of Romans chapter 1. He says, you know what? There are some men who are inflamed with passion toward other men. And there are some women who are inflamed with passion toward other women. And he calls it sin when it's practiced. When it's practiced. And I know when I say that, it's going to go out over airways. And if certain people hear it, I will get extremely criticized. And if certain people hear it, even more could happen. I'm just telling you what the book of Romans says. And then I keep going and it says, but that's not all. There are people who are murderers, and there are people who are deceivers and slanderers and gossipers and disobedient to parents and arrogant, and just keeps talking and talking and talking until finally I look at all that and say, I'm right there. I find myself, as I call it, in the list. And yet there are some people who are so pious in their righteousness and they believe so much in how right they are that they think they're not in the list. And so you go over to chapter 2 and he says, for all of you who judge all these other people and you're doing the same things, you're just as in bad shape. And so here's his conclusion. Everybody has sinned. Everybody. And your own righteousness and my own righteousness is worthless. Does that shock you? That you do not have the capacity, I do not have the capacity, nor do I have the ability to be righteous in and of myself, on my own. I can't do it. With my best intentions, I still say things I shouldn't say, and I do things I shouldn't do. But more than that, I think things I shouldn't think. And that's what makes me say and do. Am I making sense? Everybody kind of follow? And so all of a sudden, in the book of Romans chapter 3, he says, but here's the good news. There is a righteousness of God. There is God's righteousness. It's the real righteousness. And it can come to every one of us. That righteousness can come to us by faith in Jesus Christ. And haven't we seen it over and over in the book of Acts? Hasn't that been the story of the book of Acts over and over again? That people heard about their own sinfulness? And you realize if I face judgment with that sinfulness exposed in my life, it's not going to be good. And they somehow understood that. That sin is so serious. We don't understand it like that any longer, do we? The world is so full of it. It's everywhere. I'll tell you again, even on some of our favorite channels to watch, when we can find something to watch, the little subtle implications that are being put there that are so contrary to what God teaches, it's everywhere. And somehow they recognized the problem with sin as it relates to judgment. And when they heard the good news that there was a solution, and the solution is in Jesus, and the solution is forgiveness of those sins, completely, totally forgiven and forgotten through Jesus, well, you didn't have to you could have slowed them down. You didn't have to speed them up. They're rushing. And over again, what they do in the book of Acts, is it not true? What they've done in the book of Acts, they say, I don't want to live like this any longer. I want to make Jesus to be Lord. And yes, they are immersed in water, and they come up as new creatures, and their sins are gone, and God covers them with His righteousness. Now, isn't that amazing? And so now we face judgment, washed. Remember the song we sing? We've been singing it forever. Have you been washed? You're washed in the blood. Well, once you're washed in the blood of Christ, the sins are no more. And you know what judgment really is going to look like? Jesus is going to look at Janet. He's going to look at Susie. He's going to look at all of us, and you can see immediately, have we been washed? Because once we've been washed, the sins, you can't find them. We're perfectly white. We're clean as snow. And if we've been washed, the words are going to come, well done. Well done. But if we haven't been washed in the blood, I'm still standing with my sins before the God who made this world, Jesus. He was there. I'm standing before Him. And I've got to give an account, primarily, of why I didn't get washed in the blood of His Son. Because now He's going to look at that gossip stuff. And He's going to look intently at that slander stuff. And He's going to look intently at that deceitfulness. And He's going to look intently at that murder stuff. And He's going to look intently at that sexual perversion stuff. He's going to look at, it's all there. Why wouldn't Felix be a bit frightened? Because in between the two, righteousness that comes from heaven through Jesus Christ and judgment, there's the word self-control. Now, self-control is synonymous with faithfulness. That's really what it is. Because now I go through life and I try to curb these fleshly appetites. That's called self-control. And I'm going to tell you something. It's not easy, nor is it fun. I have learned that it's easy to never tell myself no. It's easy. So this week, it happened to me twice. I had a craving one night for ice cream. Literally, I had a craving for ice cream. I know what sweets do for me. Sweets make my stomach hurt. I have some kind of problem with it. And sweets make my stomach big, and Susan's been complaining about that lately. So I successfully said no. But the second time, I didn't even try to say no. I didn't even, bring it on. Add some pie with it. Self-control takes place in your mind. It doesn't take place in your hands. It doesn't take place It takes place in your mind. And that's what 2 Corinthians chapter 10 is saying, verse 4, that we take every thought and we try to make those thoughts obedient to Jesus Christ. Because if we let those thoughts get out of control, life gets out of control. So you and I go through life trying to curb our thoughts, trying to control our thoughts, trying to control our lives, all because we love Jesus Christ and all because we want to be loyal to Him. And I don't do it perfectly, but He keeps watching me. And as long as I keep trying, because of my loyalty to Him, He keeps forgiving me and forgiving me. He keeps putting His righteousness upon me. And I stand before Him someday in judgment, and He's going to say, that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted all along. My friends, it's as simple as that. That's the story of the New Testament. That's the story of the Bible. It's righteousness that comes from God through Jesus Christ. It's living a life of self-control. And it's dying and facing judgment with a smile on our face, knowing we've been washed in the blood of the Lamb. Without that, I'm in serious trouble. So here's what I want to do this morning. I want us to take the emblems of the Lord's Supper. And I have two requests. One request is that you remember that He came to make this little short story that I've told you a reality for your life. If you're listening from a distance, same thing. I want to ask you to think about, this is the gift of God. This is the grace of God, Jesus Christ. How grateful we are that we get to face judgment with Him. Then I have this second request. I want you to think about your own life in terms of righteousness, having been washed in the Lamb, and the judgment to come, and how you're living. And here's the deal. After these communion supplies are picked up, I'm not getting back up. Greg's going to get up and sing. We're all going to stand. And it's the invitation for anyone to become washed in the blood of Jesus and to start living a life of self-control in the mind. So that judgment is something we look forward to. Judgment is something we really look forward to. You know you can do that, don't you? I've had annual evaluations where I knew everything was there it was supposed to be. I could hardly wait because I knew they would circle special merit. Couldn't wait. That's the way Christians are with judgment. It's the welcome home day. It's the welcome home day. Let's take our emblems.
Our Father, we thank you so much for the time this morning to hear this word, to think about our lives and the judgment and the things that you have covered for us with the death of your Son on the cross, that through His sacrifice that we are made clean and whole, and that through His love, His grace, and mercy we have hope of eternal life. Father, now as we partake of this loaf that represents the body on the cross of Calvary, may we do so and may we remember that sacrifice not only today but every day that we live, because you have blessed us beyond belief. And Father, this morning, let us take this in remembrance of His death. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Father, again, we come before you knowing that you are the giver of life, the creator of all things. And Father, we cannot say enough about the sacrifice and the shed blood for our sins, that through Him we have life. And it's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.
There's a fountain free, 'tis for you and me. Let us haste always to its spring. 'Tis the fount of love from the source above, and He bids us all freely drink. Will you come to the fountain free? Will you come? 'Tis for you and me. come to the fountain free? Will you come? 'Tis for you and me, thirsty soul. Hear the welcome call. 'Tis a fountain open for all. There's a rock that's left, and no soul is left that may not its pure water share. 'Tis for you and me, and each stream I see. Let us hasten joyfully there. Will you come to the fountain free? Will you come? 'Tis for you and me, thirsty soul. Hear the welcome call. 'Tis the fountain open for all.
Just an update on Kevin Feltman and his surgery. He was doing really well yesterday, and he started having fluctuations in his blood pressure, and the nurses realized he was watching the OU game and the OSU game, and once they realized that, they got it under control. You know, our God is great, and life is good. Let us pray. Our most gracious and heavenly loving Father, we come to you, our loving church family, as individuals and as a family, thanking you for each and every blessing you bestow upon us. Father, you have given us this power of prayer, and we see daily how strong and how powerful it is. Father, thank you for bringing us to this first day of the week, Father. If it be thy will, please continue to watch over and care for us as only you can. Father, many of our number and many of our loved ones are in the hands of healthcare professionals, Father. Let them use their wisdom and strength to return these folks to a normal portion of their health, Father, that some may once again join with us. Father, at this time I ask a special prayer for our sister Nell and for the United States of America. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.